The Arizona Territory, 1885. Emma Caldwell stood at the edge of her father's ranch, her gaze fixed on the distant figure moving among the red rocks. Even from here, she could see how he towered over the men beside him, the Apache they called Standing Bear. She'd heard the whispers about his legendary strength, his stoic nature, his unfathomable kindness. She'd also heard her father's plans. A union between our families would bring peace to this valley, he'd said. Emma had laughed bitterly, tossing her auburn hair. I'd sooner marry a mountain lion than a giant who doesn't even speak our language. But what happens when the very man she scorns becomes her only hope for survival? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Emma lowered her brass spyglass, tucking it into the pocket of her riding skirt. The tarnished instrument had been her mother's, one of the few possessions she had left to remember her by. 8 years gone now, taken by the fever that had swept through the valley like wildfire. Emma had been just 16 then, forced to become the woman of the house overnight. The Caldwell Ranch sprawled across 2,000 acres of Arizona territory, nestled in a valley that had once been the exclusive domain of the Apache. The main house stood proudly on a gentle rise, a 2-story structure of local stone and timber that her father had built with his own hands. Behind it, the barn and corrals housed the horses and cattle that were their livelihood. Emma turned her bay mare toward home, the afternoon sun warm on her back. The air smelled of sage and dust, the persistent scent of the territory that had seeped into her very bones. This was her land, her birthright, and she'd fight tooth and nail to protect it. Miss Emma. Miguel, their foreman, rode toward her, his weathered face creased with concern. Your father's been looking for you. The banker from town is waiting at the house. Emma sighed. Mr. Henderson's visits rarely brought good news these days. Tell him I'll be right there. Thomas Caldwell sat at the large oak table that dominated their dining room, papers spread before him. Across from him, Everett Henderson fidgeted with his watch chain, his expression grave. Emma, there you are, her father said, rising slightly. At 58, Thomas Caldwell remained a handsome man, though years of hard work had etched deep lines into his face and threaded silver through his once auburn hair, the same hair that Emma had inherited, along with his stubborn nature. Mr. Henderson? Emma nodded to the banker, who merely tipped his head in acknowledgement. Unlike some men in town, Henderson at least treated her with a measure of respect, recognizing that she was as much a partner in running the ranch as her father. I've been explaining to your father the situation with the loan, Henderson said, tapping a document. With the drought going on 3 years now, the bank is concerned about the viability of the ranch. Emma took a seat beside her father, laying a protective hand on his arm. We've never missed a payment, Mr. Henderson. Not yet, the banker agreed. But your cattle herd is down by 1/3 from last year, and the price of beef has dropped. The numbers don't lie, Miss Caldwell. Thomas cleared his throat. I've been discussing alternatives with Mr. Henderson, and with Chief Running Cloud. Emma stiffened. The Apache? What do they have to do with our finances? Thomas and Henderson exchanged glances. The tribal council has proposed a cooperative agreement, her father said carefully. They have access to water sources we don't, techniques for dry farming that could help us through the drought. In exchange for what? Emma asked, suspicion rising. Thomas looked uncomfortable. We'll discuss that later in private. After Henderson left, Emma unfolded the faded boundary map from its place in her father's desk. The Caldwell Ranch was marked in faded ink, while the Apache reservation boundaries were shown in red. Between them lay a disputed strip of land that had been the source of tension for decades. You can't be serious about partnering with them, Emma said, tracing the boundary line with her finger. Thomas sighed, easing himself into his leather chair. The world is changing, Emma. The old ways of fighting over land, they don't work anymore. There's room enough for all of us if we're smart about it. They killed settlers in the Rawlins Valley last spring, Emma reminded him. Renegades, Thomas countered. Not Running Cloud's people. His band has kept peace for 15 years. He rubbed his temples. Standing Bear approached me with the idea months ago. He sees the future clearer than most. Emma's jaw tightened. Standing Bear, the giant. He's a good man, Thomas said quietly. Educated at the Indian school in Santa Fe. Speaks better English than half the folks in town. If he's so civilized, why does he live with the tribe instead of in town? Thomas gave her a disappointed look. That's exactly the kind of thinking that keeps the fighting going, Emma. His people need him. He's a healer, a leader. Just because he chooses their ways doesn't make him savage. Emma turned away, unwilling to continue the argument. She knew where it was heading, the same place her father's conversations had been leading for weeks now. Marriage, alliance, the joining of two families to secure the future of both. She'd rather die first. The Apache settlement lay nestled in a sheltered valley 3 miles from the Caldwell Ranch. Unlike the stereotype of temporary camps, the band had established semi-permanent dwellings, a mixture of traditional wickiups and more modern structures influenced by Mexican and American designs. Gardens flourished near a spring-fed stream, and horses grazed in meadows protected by the surrounding hills. Standing Bear sat cross-legged outside his dwelling, carefully attaching an eagle feather to a wooden handle. The feather had been a gift from his father before he died, a symbol of leadership and responsibility. At 34 years of age, Standing Bear had already lived longer than many of his people, surviving both the white man's wars and diseases. The council is gathering, said Swift Arrow, his younger brother by 4 years. Unlike Standing Bear's imposing 6'4" frame, Swift Arrow was wiry and quick, better suited to hunting than battle. Standing Bear nodded, tucking the eagle feather into his belt. Running Cloud wishes to discuss the Caldwell matter again? Yes, the old man is persistent. Swift Arrow grinned. He believes your children would be both tall and wise. Standing Bear gave his brother a stern look that didn't quite mask his amusement. The alliance is about land and water, not children. So you say now, Swift Arrow teased. I've seen how you watch the red-haired daughter when you think no one is looking. Standing Bear couldn't deny his interest in Emma Caldwell. He'd observed her from afar many times, her strength as she worked alongside the ranch hands, her gentleness with her aging father, her fierce independence. But he'd also seen her suspicion when Apache riders passed near their land, the way her hand would drift to the rifle she kept within reach. The tribal council gathered in the central clearing. 8 elders sat in a semicircle with Chief Running Cloud at the center. At 76, the chief had witnessed the world transform around him, from the days when Apache ruled the territory unchallenged to the current uneasy coexistence with white settlers. We have received word from Thomas Caldwell, Running Cloud announced once all were seated. He is open to our proposal but faces resistance from his daughter. Murmurs rippled through the gathering. An elder woman, Gray Dove, spoke up. The daughter has a reputation for stubbornness. Perhaps she would respond better to a woman's counsel. Running Cloud considered this. Perhaps. But first, Standing Bear must meet with her formally. He turned to the tall warrior. You have remained silent on this matter. What are your thoughts? Standing Bear ran his thumb along the edge of the eagle feather. Thomas Caldwell is an honorable man who has treated our people fairly. His daughter is strong-willed but devoted to their land. He paused. An alliance would benefit both our peoples, especially with the dry seasons growing longer. But I will not force my presence where it is unwelcome. The white man's world presses closer every season, said Black Knife, the oldest of the council members. Their railroad will reach the valley within 2 years. More settlers will follow. We must secure our position before then. Standing Bear nodded, understanding the political necessity. Yet something in him resisted the idea of a marriage built solely on convenience. His first wife, Morning Flower, had died in childbirth 5 years ago. Their union had been one of genuine affection. The thought of a loveless arrangement with a woman who despised him held little appeal. "I will speak with Thomas and his daughter," Standing Bear finally agreed. "But if she remains opposed, we should consider other options for alliance." Later, as darkness fell over the settlement, Standing Bear stood at the edge of the camp, looking toward the distant lights of the Caldwell ranch. Swift Arrow joined him, offering a pipe. "You worry too much, brother," Swift Arrow said as they shared the pipe. "The red-haired woman may surprise you." Standing Bear exhaled a plume of smoke. "She calls me the giant, not with respect, but with scorn." Swift Arrow laughed softly. "Then show her that your heart is even larger than your shadow. Our mother did not raise a man who fears a woman's sharp tongue." Standing Bear smiled despite himself. Their mother had indeed been formidable, raising 2 sons alone after their father fell in battle. She had taught them that true strength lay not in dominance but in patience, wisdom, and compassion. "Tomorrow," Standing Bear decided, tucking the eagle feather more securely in his belt, "we will visit the Caldwell ranch. It is time this matter was settled, one way or another." Dawn broke over the Caldwell ranch with a splash of orange and pink across the eastern sky. Emma had been up for an hour already, checking the irrigation ditches that fed their kitchen garden. The drought had reduced the once robust stream to a trickle, barely enough to keep their vegetables alive. A shout from the main house sent her running, her boots kicking up dust. Miguel stood on the porch, his expression frantic. "It's your father, Miss Emma. Come quick." She found Thomas collapsed beside his bed, his nightshirt soaked with sweat, his breathing labored. Emma dropped to her knees beside him. "Papa, what's wrong?" His eyes fluttered open, unfocused and glassy. "Just a bit dizzy," he mumbled, attempting a smile that turned into a grimace. "Help me back to bed." With Miguel's assistance, they got Thomas settled. Emma pressed her palm to his forehead and drew back in alarm. "He's burning up. Miguel, ride for Dr. Phillips. Fast as you can." While waiting for the doctor, Emma bathed her father's face with cool water. Thomas drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes muttering about cattle prices, other times calling for her mother as if she were still alive. Dr. Phillips arrived 2 hours later, his medical bag clutched in his weathered hands. After a thorough examination, he beckoned Emma into the hallway. "Valley fever, most likely," he said grimly. "It's been spreading with all this dry weather stirring up the dust." Emma's stomach tightened. Valley fever had taken 3 ranch hands 2 summers ago. How bad? Hard to say. His age works against him, and his heart isn't as strong as it once was. The doctor reached into his bag and withdrew a small brown bottle. "This will help with the fever and pain. 2 drops every 4 hours. But what he really needs is rest and proper care." Emma took the medicine bottle, her fingers trembling slightly. "Will he recover?" Dr. Phillips hesitated. "With proper treatment, yes. But I'll be honest with you, Miss Caldwell. He needs stronger medicine than what I carry. There's a new treatment available in Tucson, expensive, but effective." "How expensive?" $50 for a month's supply. Emma's heart sank. $50 might as well have been $500 with their current finances. She thanked the doctor, paid his $5 fee from their dwindling cash reserves, and saw him out. In her father's study, Emma unlocked the bottom drawer of his desk where he kept their financial records. The situation was even worse than she'd feared. The drought had decimated their cattle herd, and beef prices had plummeted. The last bank statement showed they had barely $20 to their name, with the quarterly loan payment of $100 due in 3 weeks. Emma pressed her fingers against her temples, fighting back tears. They couldn't lose the ranch. It was all they had, all she had. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. "Rosalinda," Their cook and housekeeper peered in cautiously. "How is he, Miss Emma?" "Not good, Rosa. He needs medicine we can't afford." The older woman crossed herself. "I have a little saved. It's yours." Emma smiled gratefully. "Thank you, but I can't take your savings. I'll find another way." After Rosalinda left, Emma returned to the financial ledgers, searching for any solution. As she flipped through the pages, a folded letter fell out. The handwriting on the outside was unfamiliar, bold, precise strokes that formed her father's name. Emma hesitated only briefly before opening it. The letter was from Standing Bear, dated 3 weeks earlier. It outlined a proposal for joining their lands through a cooperative agreement and through marriage. The Apache would contribute their knowledge of dry farming techniques and access to hidden springs in exchange for the Caldwell's cattle expertise and legal standing with the territorial government. The final paragraph made Emma's blood run cold. As discussed, a union between our families would solidify this arrangement in the eyes of both our peoples and the territorial authorities. I await your daughter's consideration of this matter. Emma crumpled the letter in her fist. So this was what her father had been working toward. A business arrangement with her as the trade goods. Her hands shook with anger and something else. Fear. With Thomas ill, the ranch's future hung by a thread. She couldn't manage it alone. Not with the loan payment looming and her father needing expensive medicine. She glanced at the small bottle Dr. Phillips had left behind. It wouldn't last the week. And Thomas needed the stronger medicine from Tucson if he was to recover. Emma placed the bottle carefully on her father's bedside table, its contents catching the afternoon light like liquid amber. Her future or her father's life. Some choice. By late afternoon, Thomas was lucid enough to sit propped up in bed. Emma brought him a cup of broth, settling beside him with the crumpled letter in her hand. "Were you going to tell me about this?" she asked, her voice tight with controlled anger. Thomas glanced at the letter and sighed. "I was waiting for the right time. The right time to tell me you'd offered me in marriage to an Apache?" Emma's composure cracked. "Like a cow at auction?" "It's not like that, Emma." Thomas reached for her hand, but she pulled away. "Standing Bear is a good man. Educated, respected. This valley is changing. So you keep saying. But selling your daughter isn't the answer." Thomas's face flushed with more than fever. "I'm not selling anyone. I'm trying to secure our future, your future. What happens to this ranch when I'm gone? You can't run it alone. Not with the bank breathing down our necks." "I'd rather sell to strangers than marry one," Emma retorted. A knock at the door saved Thomas from responding. Miguel appeared, his expression uneasy. "Miss Emma, Chief Running Cloud and Standing Bear are here. They say they were expected." Emma whirled to face her father. "You invited them? Today? When you can barely sit up?" "The meeting was arranged weeks ago," Thomas said wearily. "With the tribal council. It would be a grave insult to turn them away now." Emma wanted to refuse to send the Apache visitors away, but she recognized the political reality. Their precarious situation couldn't withstand the addition of tribal hostility. "Fine. Tell them we'll receive them in the parlor in 15 minutes. Emma helped her father dress and supported him down the stairs. In the small formal parlor, rarely used since her mother's death, she settled Thomas in his armchair before going to greet their visitors. 3 men waited on the porch. An elderly man with deep lines etched into his copper face, a younger man who stood straight as a pine, and Standing Bear himself. Up close, his height was even more imposing. Emma had to tilt her head back to meet his gaze. "Welcome to our home," she said stiffly. "My father is unwell but able to receive you briefly." Standing Bear's dark eyes studied her face. "We will not overtire him," he said, his voice deep and unexpectedly gentle. His English was indeed flawless, with just a hint of an accent that rounded his vowels. In the parlor, Chief Running Cloud presented Thomas with a carved wooden stick adorned with feathers and beads. The talking stick, he explained through Standing Bear's translation. When one holds it, others must listen without interruption. The formalities of introduction completed, they settled into an uneasy circle. Thomas held the talking stick first, outlining the benefits of their proposed alliance with more strength than Emma had expected. The Apache nodded in understanding. Chief Running Cloud took the stick next. Through Standing Bear's translation, he spoke of the changing times, the pressure from white settlers, and the need for new approaches to survival. Our ways have wisdom the white man has forgotten, Standing Bear translated. Your ways have advantages we need to learn. Together, we are stronger than apart. When the stick passed to Emma, she clutched it tightly. While I respect your people's knowledge and the value of cooperation, I cannot accept an arrangement that includes my marriage to a man I do not know, from a culture I do not understand. Standing Bear translated her words without emotion, though Emma thought she detected a flicker of something. Hurt? Relief? In his eyes. When the stick came to Standing Bear, he spoke directly to Emma in English. I do not seek an unwilling bride. Among my people, a woman chooses her husband as often as she is chosen. This was meant as an opportunity for both our peoples, not a burden for you to bear. His dignity made Emma's defiance feel childish, which only fueled her resentment. I'll never marry a giant, she said sharply, forgetting the talking stick protocol, no matter how convenient it might be for everyone else. Thomas gasped at her rudeness. Chief Running Cloud's expression remained impassive, though his eyes narrowed slightly. Standing Bear simply nodded. Your feelings are clear, Miss Caldwell. He turned to Thomas. We still wish to discuss cooperative farming methods, if you are well enough. Thomas started to respond but was overcome by a coughing fit. Emma rushed to his side as he struggled to breathe, his face alarmingly pale. Standing Bear moved with surprising speed for his size. He knelt beside Thomas, checking his pulse with practiced fingers. He needs rest, he said to Emma, and medicine. I can bring herbs that may help. We have a doctor, Emma said defensively. Your doctor has not cured him, Standing Bear observed. My people have treated valley fever for generations. Thomas clutched Emma's hand. Let him help, he wheezed. Please. Before Emma could answer, Miguel burst into the room. Miss Emma, there's a storm coming, a big one. The weather service sent warnings. They're saying possible flooding in the lowlands. The Apache exchanged glances. We must return to our people, Chief Running Cloud said through Standing Bear. But we will come again with medicine, and to continue our talks. As they departed, thunder rumbled in the distance. Emma stood on the porch watching the three men ride away, the wind picking up around her, tugging at her hair and skirts. Like her life, the weather was changing too fast, and there seemed nothing she could do but hold on and pray. 3 days later, the storm still threatened but hadn't broken. The sky hung heavy and dark, the air thick with moisture and anticipation. Emma found the waiting almost worse than the storm itself would be. She'd spent the morning in the west pasture with Miguel and the remaining ranch hands, moving cattle to higher ground. 2 men had quit yesterday, spooked by the weather warnings and drawn by the promise of mining jobs to the north. Emma couldn't blame them, but their departure left the ranch dangerously understaffed. The creek's already rising, Miss Emma, Miguel reported, his weathered face creased with worry. If the storm hits like they're saying, the lower pastures will flood for sure. Emma nodded, pushing a strand of damp hair from her face. We'll lose the south hay field, but if we can keep the cattle safe and the barn standing, we'll manage. Miguel looked unconvinced but didn't argue. They both knew how precarious their situation had become. Back at the house, Emma found Thomas awake but weak. Dr. Phillips's medicine had reduced his fever, but the cough remained, rattling deep in his chest. You should be resting, Thomas said when she described the morning's work. Emma forced a smile. I'm fine, Papa. The men did the heavy lifting. What men? Half have left already. Thomas struggled to sit up. Emma, we need to be practical. Even if I recover quickly, this storm could ruin us. We've weathered storms before. Not like this. Not with the bank loan due. He took her hand. I want you to ride to the Apache settlement. Ask Standing Bear for help. Emma stiffened. After how I spoke to him, he'd laugh in my face. He's not that kind of man. You'd know that if you gave him a chance. A crash from outside interrupted them. Emma rushed to the window to see the barn doors flapping wildly in the rising wind, one hanging precariously from a single hinge. I have to secure those before they tear off completely, she said, grabbing her coat. Outside, the wind nearly knocked her off her feet. Emma struggled to reach the barn, finally making it inside where the horses nickered nervously in their stalls. The damaged door required both hinges replaced, a two-person job at minimum. As she gathered tools, Emma's eyes fell on a dusty trunk in the corner. Her mother's belongings, stored here after her death when Thomas couldn't bear to see them in the house. Something compelled Emma to open it. Inside lay neatly folded dresses, a pair of worn boots, and a leather-bound journal Emma had never seen before. She opened it, recognizing her mother's elegant handwriting immediately. April 12, 1874. Chief Running Cloud's wife brought her new baby today. Such a beautiful child. She allowed me to hold him while she examined my garden. We communicate mostly through gestures, but there is a friendship growing between us that requires no words. Thomas says I should be careful that not all Apache are friendly, but I believe in seeing people as individuals, not as the fears we project upon them. Asterisk. Emma flipped forward several pages. Asterisk June 30th, 1874. The drought continues. Our crops would have failed entirely if not for Gray Dove's knowledge of desert plants. The Apache methods of irrigation use half the water with better results. Thomas has begun implementing their techniques across the ranch. Some neighbors call us Indian lovers now, but their fields are brown while ours remain green. Asterisk. The journal revealed a side of her mother Emma had never known. A woman who crossed cultural boundaries with compassion and curiosity, who saw the Apache not as enemies but as fellow human beings with valuable knowledge and friendship to offer. A sudden gust of wind jolted Emma back to the present as the damaged barn door tore completely free. She rushed outside in time to see it cartwheeling across the yard. "Miss Emma!" Miguel shouted from the bunkhouse. "Telegraph lines are down." The stage driver stopped by. Says the river's already over its banks 10 miles south. Emma felt a cold dread settle in her stomach. Without the telegraph, they were isolated. If the floods came, they'd have no way to call for help. By nightfall, 3 more ranch hands had packed their belongings. "Sorry, Miss Emma," one said, unable to meet her eyes. "Got family in town. Need to be with them if this flood comes." Left with only Miguel and Rosalinda, Emma sat at her father's bedside, the journal clutched in her hands. Thomas slept fitfully. His breathing labored despite the medicine. "What would you do, Mama?" Emma whispered, tracing her mother's handwriting with her fingertip. "How did you find the courage to reach across that divide?" Outside, the first heavy raindrops began to fall, drumming against the roof like impatient fingers. The storm had arrived, and with it, a decision Emma could no longer avoid. Tomorrow, she would have to swallow her pride and seek help from the one person she'd vowed never to need. Standing Bear, the Apache giant. Dawn arrived with a steady downpour that had already turned the ranch yard into a muddy quagmire. Emma had slept little, dividing her night between checking on her father and watching the water level in the creek that bordered their property. By morning, the creek had swelled to twice its normal size, its usually clear water now a churning brown torrent. Emma saddled her mare, ignoring the animal's nervous dancing. "I won't be long, girl," she murmured, patting the horse's sleek neck. "You cannot go alone, Miss Emma," Miguel protested. "The trails will be dangerous." Someone has to stay with Papa. I'll be careful. Emma swung into the saddle, pulling her oilskin coat tighter against the rain. If I'm not back by nightfall, Miguel nodded grimly, I will come looking. The journey to the Apache settlement normally took less than an hour on horseback. Today, with washed-out trails and rising water, Emma knew it would take considerably longer. She'd memorized the route from her father's maps but had never actually visited the Apache camp before. 2 miles from the ranch, she came to the normally shallow stream that fed into their creek. Now it rushed angrily across the trail, at least 4 feet deep at its center. Emma was considering her options when a voice called out over the roar of the water. Miss Caldwell. On the opposite bank stood Standing Bear, mounted on a sturdy paint horse. Even through the curtain of rain, his towering figure was unmistakable. The crossing is not safe, he called. Follow the bank upstream. There is a fallen tree a 1/4 mile up that will serve as a bridge. Too practical to reject sound advice, Emma nodded and turned her horse. Standing Bear rode parallel to her on the opposite bank until they reached the fallen pine that spanned the stream. With expert guidance, he helped Emma lead her nervous mare across the makeshift bridge. Once safely on the other side, Emma found herself uncomfortably close to the Apache. Rain dripped from the brim of his hat, and his buckskin shirt was dark with moisture. "Thank you," she said stiffly. "I was coming to find you." Standing Bear's expression remained neutral, but surprise flickered in his eyes. "Your father. His condition has worsened. You offered medicine." Standing Bear nodded. "I was bringing it to you." He patted a deerskin pouch attached to his saddle. "The elders prepared it yesterday." They rode side by side through the rain, following a trail only Standing Bear could see through the dense pine forest. When they emerged into a small clearing, he raised a hand, signaling her to stop. "We have company," he said quietly. 3 riders appeared through the trees ahead, rough-looking white men, rifles visible despite the rain covers on their saddles. "Well, look what we found," the lead rider called out. His mouth twisted in an ugly grin beneath his drooping mustache. "Caldwell's girl out for a ride with her pet Indian." Emma stiffened. She recognized Harlan Peters, a small-time rancher with a big reputation for trouble. The 2 men with him were strangers, probably drifters hired for the seasonal work. "We're on urgent business, Mr. Peters," Emma said coldly. "Please let us pass." Peters spat a stream of tobacco juice that mixed with the muddy puddles at his horse's feet. "Business with Indians, huh? Your daddy know you're keeping such friendly company?" Standing Bear remained silent beside her, but Emma sensed the tension in his posture. "My father is gravely ill. Standing Bear is bringing medicine. Now stand aside." Peters's hand drifted to his holstered pistol. "Maybe we ought to escort you home. Make sure you get there safe. Dangerous for a woman to be out with savages." "The only danger here wears a dirty brown hat and hasn't bathed in a month," Emma snapped, her patience gone. "Move aside, or I'll report your interference to Sheriff Davis." Peters's face darkened with anger. His 2 companions shifted uneasily, hands moving toward their weapons. Standing Bear spoke for the first time, his voice calm but carrying an unmistakable authority. "The storm grows worse. Flash floods will come soon. This is no time for foolish quarrels." As if emphasizing his point, thunder cracked overhead, and the rain intensified. Peters hesitated, then jerked his head at his companions. "This ain't over," he growled as they moved their horses off the trail. "Your daddy better watch himself. Getting cozy with Indians. Folks won't stand for it." Once the men were out of sight, Emma released a shaky breath. "Thank you for staying calm." They were looking for an excuse. Standing Bear nodded. "Men like that always are." From his saddlebag, he produced a small leather pouch decorated with intricate beadwork. "Your father's medicine. The herbs must be brewed into a tea 3 times daily. There is enough for 2 weeks." Emma took the pouch, surprised by its weight. What do I owe you for this? Nothing. We help because it is right to help. Standing Bear's gaze held hers steadily. Your father has been a friend to my people when others were not. They reached the ranch as the day's light was fading. Thomas's condition had deteriorated further, his breathing shallow and his skin burning with fever. Standing Bear knelt beside the bed, opening his medicine pouch. With practiced movements, he measured herbs into a cup, added hot water brought by Rosalinda, and stirred the mixture with a slender wooden stick carved with symbols Emma didn't recognize. This will taste bitter, Standing Bear warned as he helped Thomas drink. But it will draw out the fever. Thomas managed 3 swallows before falling back against the pillows, exhausted. Standing Bear placed a large hand on the older man's forehead, his touch surprisingly gentle for a man of his size. He is very weak, Standing Bear said quietly. The medicine will help, but he needs constant care. I'll watch over him, Emma promised. Standing Bear studied her face. You are also exhausted, and there is a ranch to manage with a storm coming. You cannot do everything alone. Before Emma could protest, he added, I will send my brother and 2 others at first light. They are good with cattle and know how to prepare for floods. Emma wanted to refuse, to insist they could manage. But her mother's journal entries echoed in her mind, and the practical reality was undeniable. They needed help. Thank you, she said simply. As Standing Bear prepared to leave, he paused at the door. The offer of alliance still stands, Miss Caldwell. But know this, it was never meant as a burden. Sometimes what begins as duty can grow into something more valuable. With those words, he departed into the rain, leaving Emma to wonder if he spoke of the alliance between their peoples, or something far more personal. To BY morning, Thomas showed small signs of improvement. His fever had dropped slightly, and his breathing seemed less labored. Emma had dozed in the chair beside his bed, waking every hour to administer the Apache medicine as Standing Bear had instructed. The rain continued unabated, drumming against the roof and windows. Emma was checking the water level in the rain barrels when she spotted riders approaching, Swift Arrow and 2 other Apache men, true to Standing Bear's promise. My brother sends his greetings, Swift Arrow said as he dismounted, his English nearly as fluent as Standing Bear's. He would have come himself but was needed at our settlement. The elders are concerned about the rising water. Emma led them to the barn where Miguel waited. We need to move the cattle to the high pasture and secure anything that might wash away. Swift Arrow nodded. The men from town have posted warnings. They say this will be the worst flooding in 20 years. Working alongside the Apache men, Emma found herself impressed by their efficiency and knowledge. They reinforced the barn doors with techniques she'd never seen, digging channels to direct water away from the foundation. By midday, most of the cattle had been relocated to higher ground. Emma returned to the house to check on Thomas, finding him awake and alert enough to take some broth. The Apache men came? He asked. Emma nodded. They've been invaluable. I don't think we could have managed without them. Thomas smiled weakly. Perhaps you're seeing what I've been trying to tell you. A crash from the kitchen interrupted them. Emma rushed in to find water pouring through a corner of the ceiling. Rosalinda was already placing buckets to catch the worst of it. The roof's leaking in 3 places now, Rosalinda reported grimly, and the creek's risen another foot in the last hour. Emma grabbed more buckets. If it reaches the bridge, we'll be cut off from town, Rosalinda finished. A shout from outside drew Emma to the porch. Swift Arrow pointed urgently toward the western slope. Flash flood coming down the canyon. We need to move now. Emma could see it, a wall of muddy water churning down the narrow canyon that fed into their valley. It would hit the main creek within minutes, potential. LY doubling its volume instantly. Miguel, Emma called. Help Rosalinda get my father to the upper floor. Outside, chaos erupted as they scrambled to save what they could. The Apache men worked with remarkable coordination, their actions seeming almost choreographed as they secured horses and equipment. Emma was struggling to close the paddock gate against the wind when Standing Bear appeared beside her, his massive hands easily forcing the latch into place. "You came," she said, surprised. "The situation at our settlement is under control. I thought you might need additional help." His dark eyes assessed the property with a practiced gaze. "The creek will breach its banks within the hour. We should move anything valuable to the upper floor of your house." Together they worked methodically, transferring important documents, family heirlooms, and supplies upstairs. In Thomas's study, Emma reached for the family Bible, its leather cover worn smooth by generations of hands. As she lifted it, water suddenly poured through a new leak in the ceiling, soaking the book before she could move it away. "No!" Emma cried, trying to blot the precious pages with her apron. Standing Bear gently took the Bible from her hands. "We can save it," he said, carefully separating the wet pages. "My people preserve deerskin by similar methods. The words will not be lost." His confidence calmed her. They carefully arranged the Bible near the fireplace, where the gentle heat would dry it without causing further damage. As they worked, Emma found herself studying Standing Bear when he wasn't looking. His movements were efficient, his strength obvious but controlled. He never wasted emotion or spoke an unnecessary word. So different from the impulsive, boastful men she'd known in town. "You're staring," he said without turning, as he secured the window shutters. Emma flushed. I've never worked with someone so methodical." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "And I have never worked with someone so determined. You remind me of the willow, bending with the storm but never breaking." The unexpected compliment left Emma momentarily speechless. A frantic pounding at the door interrupted the moment. Swift Arrow burst in, water streaming from his clothes. "The bridge is gone, and the water keeps rising. We need to move to higher ground immediately." Standing Bear nodded. "How is Thomas Caldwell?" "Stable enough to be moved," Emma said. "But where? The upper floor might not be safe if the water keeps rising." "There is a cave in the eastern ridge," Standing Bear said, "high above the flood line, with a southern exposure that keeps it dry. My people have used it as shelter for generations." Emma hesitated only briefly. "We'll need to fashion a stretcher for my father." As they prepared to evacuate, Emma found herself making decisions alongside Standing Bear as if they'd worked together for years. There was a natural rhythm to their cooperation that surprised her, an unspoken understanding that transcended their cultural differences. Looking at the family Bible, now carefully wrapped in oilskin, Emma realized that something fundamental had shifted. The man she had dismissed as just the giant had become, in the space of a crisis, someone she trusted with her father's life, her home, and her future. And that realization frightened her more than the rising waters. The eastern cave proved to be larger and more hospitable than Emma had expected. Standing Bear and his men had quickly outfitted it with supplies from both the ranch and their settlement. Furs for bedding, dried food, medicinal herbs, and containers for collecting rainwater. Thomas rested comfortably on a pallet near the cave's rear wall, where Swift Arrow had built a small, nearly smokeless fire. The Apache's knowledge of creating ventilation in the enclosed space impressed Emma, another skill she would never have acquired on her own. 3 days had passed since they'd evacuated the ranch. The rain continued, though less violently now. From the cave's entrance, they could see the valley below, much of it submerged under muddy water. The main house still stood, its upper floor above the flood line, but the barn was partially collapsed, and fences had been washed away completely. "Your cattle are safe," Standing Bear reported, returning from a scouting expedition with Miguel. "The high pasture remains dry, but the creek has changed course. It now runs through your eastern field." Emma nodded, accepting this new reality. "At least we still have the herd. We can rebuild fences." Standing Bear studied her face. You are taking this calmly. What choice do I have? Raging against the water won't make it recede. Emma smiled faintly. Besides, I've had an excellent example of stoicism these past days. The corner of Standing Bear's mouth lifted slightly, the closest he came to a smile. My people would say you have a strong spirit, like the mountain, unmoved by the storm. Emma felt a warmth spread through her that had nothing to do with the nearby fire. Such simple words, yet they touched her deeply. Swift Arrow approached, carrying a small wooden carving he'd been working on. For you, he said, presenting it to Emma. A horse, like your mare. Emma accepted the gift, touched by the detailed craftsmanship. The small wooden horse captured her bay's spirit perfectly, from the proud arch of its neck to its flowing mane. It's beautiful, she said sincerely. Thank you. Swift Arrow grinned, clearly pleased. Unlike his more reserved brother, the younger Apache was expressive and quick to laugh. Over the past days, he'd appointed himself Thomas's personal entertainer, telling stories that made the sick man chuckle despite his weakness. My brother taught me to carve, Swift Arrow said, nodding toward Standing Bear. His hands may be large, but they create things of great delicacy. Emma glanced at Standing Bear with new curiosity. You're an artist? I work with wood sometimes. Standing Bear's tone was dismissive, but Emma caught a hint of embarrassment. Simple things, nothing special. He carved a cradle so fine it made the mothers weep, Swift Arrow continued, ignoring his brother's discomfort. After his wife died, a silence fell over the group. Emma hadn't known how to respond to this revelation about Standing Bear's past. His loss humanized him in ways she hadn't expected. Later, as Thomas slept and the others prepared the evening meal, Emma found Standing Bear sitting alone at the cave entrance, watching the rain. May I join you? She asked. He nodded, shifting to make room on the stone ledge. They sat in companionable silence for several minutes. I'm sorry about your wife, Emma finally said. Swift Arrow mentioned, I didn't know. Standing Bear continued to gaze at the rain-swept landscape. Morning flower. She died 5 winters ago, bringing our son into the world. The child also did not survive. The simple statement held such profound grief that Emma felt tears prick her eyes. I'm so sorry. It is the way of life, Standing Bear said quietly. Joy and sorrow walk together on the same path. Emma thought of her mother, taken too young by fever. Yes, she agreed softly. They do. Your father is improving, Standing Bear observed, changing the subject. His spirit is strong, like his daughter's. Thanks to your medicine and your brother's stories. Emma smiled. He's good for Papa. Makes him laugh. Swift Arrow brings light wherever he goes. It is his gift. Standing Bear glanced at her. As bringing order and clarity is yours. Emma raised her eyebrows. Me? I've been nothing but confusion since this flood began. I have watched you these past days. You think clearly in crisis. You see what needs to be done and do it without hesitation. These are rare qualities. The unexpected praise warmed her. I've watched you too, she admitted. You lead without demanding. Your men follow you because they respect you, not because they fear you. Standing Bear looked surprised, then pleased by her observation. That is the highest compliment you could give me. As darkness fell, they remained at the cave entrance, their conversation moving from practical matters to more personal revelations. Emma described her childhood on the ranch, her mother's gentle influence, her father's determination to build something lasting. Standing Bear spoke of his education at the Indian school, his decision to return to his people rather than pursue opportunities in the white world, his hope for a future where both cultures could coexist. Emma was struck by how easily they communicated now, without the barriers of suspicion and prejudice that had separated them before. She found herself laughing at his dry observations, leaning forward eagerly to hear his stories, forgetting entirely that just days ago she had dismissed him as simply the giant. When Swift Arrow called them for the evening meal, Emma realized with surprise that she had been looking forward to these quiet conversations with Standing Bear. More surprising still was the realization that she was beginning to see him not as an Apache, not as a potential alliance, but simply as a man, one whose strength, wisdom, and gentleness she had come to admire. The thought both thrilled and terrified her. A week after the flood's peak, the waters began to recede. Patches of mud-covered land emerged from beneath the brown expanse, and the sun finally broke through the clouds. The change in weather lifted everyone's spirits, particularly Thomas, whose condition continued to improve under the combined care of Rosalinda and Swift Arrow. "I think we can move your father back to the house tomorrow," Standing Bear told Emma as they surveyed the valley from the ridge path. "The upper floor should be safe and dry." Emma nodded, shading her eyes against the bright morning light. "The road to town might be passable in another day or two. We need to check with the bank about extending our loan payment." "I will accompany you," Standing Bear offered. "The banker may be more flexible if he sees our peoples working together." Emma smiled at his use of "our," a subtle acknowledgement of their developing partnership. Before she could respond, Miguel appeared on the path below, waving urgently. "Miss Emma, riders coming from town." They hurried down to the clearing where the path widened. 3 men on horseback approached, picking their way carefully through the mud. The leader, a well-dressed man in his 40s with a neat beard and expensive boots, was a stranger to Emma. Behind him rode Henderson, the banker, looking uncomfortable, and Sheriff Davis, whose expression was unreadable beneath his drooping mustache. "Miss Caldwell," the lead rider tipped his hat. "James Hollister, representing Western Territories Development Company." His gaze shifted to Standing Bear, a flicker of surprise crossing his face before his smooth expression returned. "I wasn't aware the Caldwell Ranch employed native workers." Emma stiffened at his tone. "Mr. Standing Bear and his people have been instrumental in helping us weather the flood." "What can I do for you, Mr. Hollister?" Hollister dismounted, his polished boots sinking slightly in the muddy ground. "I've come about a land matter that concerns both you and the Apache settlement." He reached into his saddlebag and withdrew a leather portfolio. "I believe you'll want your father present for this discussion." "My father is recovering from illness," Emma said. "I handle all ranch business in his stead." "As you wish." Hollister extracted several official-looking documents. "These are land deeds and water rights for approximately 60% of what you currently consider Caldwell Ranch, as well as the northern section of Apache territory that includes the natural springs." Emma felt as if the ground had dropped away beneath her feet. "That's impossible. This ranch has been in my family for 30 years. Hollister smiled thinly. "The original survey was flawed, I'm afraid. The territorial governor has approved a corrected version." He handed her the papers. "As you can see, my company now legally owns these sections. We're prepared to be generous, however. You may continue to lease the land for a reasonable fee." Standing Bear had moved closer, his presence solid and reassuring beside Emma. "These springs have belonged to my people since before your government existed," he said, his voice calm but carrying an edge of steel. Henderson cleared his throat nervously. "The documents appear to be in order, Emma. They have the territorial seal." Sheriff Davis nodded. "Governor signed off on them last month. Nothing I can do about it legally." Emma scanned the papers, her mind racing. The legal language was complex, but the maps were clear enough. Hollister's claim cut through the heart of their ranch, including the best grazing land and their access to the creek. "This is theft dressed up in legal papers," she said flatly. Hollister's smile didn't waver. "Strong words, Miss Caldwell. I understand your emotional attachment to the property, but business is business. The development company has plans for this valley, plans that will bring progress and prosperity." "What kind of plans?" Standing Bear asked. A dam, primarily. The floods have demonstrated the need for water control. Then a proper town, rail access, perhaps mining operations in the hills. Hollister gestured expansively. The future is coming to this valley, whether you embrace it or not. Emma exchanged glances with Standing Bear, seeing her own alarm reflected in his eyes. A dam would forever alter the valley's ecosystem, potentially destroying both the ranch and the Apache way of life. How convenient that you appear immediately after a flood with plans for a dam, Standing Bear observed. Hollister's smile tightened. Natural disasters often reveal opportunities. Now, I'll need you both to acknowledge receipt of these notices. He held out a pen. You have 30 days to either vacate or negotiate lease terms. Emma didn't take the pen. I need to consult with my father and our lawyer in town. Of course. Hollister returned the pen to his pocket. I'll return in 3 days for your preliminary response. His gaze shifted to Standing Bear. I suggest you inform your tribal council as well. The governor is particularly interested in resolving the Aboriginal claims efficiently. The threat beneath his polite words was unmistakable. After the 3 men departed, Emma sank onto a fallen log, the papers clutched in her trembling hands. This can't be legal. The ranch has been properly deeded since 1855. Standing Bear sat beside her, his large frame making the log creak. The white man's papers have taken Indian lands many times. Now they come for yours as well. We have to fight this, Emma said, anger replacing her initial shock. Together. Standing Bear studied her face. Together, he agreed. This threat concerns both our peoples. Emma suddenly remembered something. Papa once mentioned that Henderson had tried to buy our land several times over the years. Said he always seemed too interested in the property. The banker and Hollister knew each other, Standing Bear observed. Did you notice how Henderson avoided looking at you directly? Emma nodded slowly. You think Henderson is working with Hollister? That these documents might be. She hesitated to voice the suspicion. Forged. Standing Bear finished. It would not be the first time false papers have been used to steal land. A new determination hardened in Emma's chest. We need to get to town. Check the records ourselves. She looked up at Standing Bear. Will you come with me? He nodded, his dark eyes holding hers. I told you before, together. The simple word carried more meaning than Emma was ready to acknowledge. But as they walked back to the cave to inform the others, she realized that the crisis had cemented something between them. A partnership that transcended cultural differences and personal prejudices. Hollister's threat had created the very alliance he sought to prevent. The next morning dawned with ominous dark clouds gathering again on the western horizon. Weatherwise locals recognized the signs. Another major storm system was approaching, threatening to bring more rain to the already saturated ground. We need to reach town before the roads become impassable again, Emma said as she saddled her mare. Thomas, now strong enough to sit up and move around the cave with assistance, had examined Hollister's documents the previous evening. These look official, he'd admitted reluctantly. But something isn't right. Henderson has been acting strangely for months. Canceling our meetings, avoiding discussions about refinancing. Standing Bear had suggested they search the town records for the original deeds and any evidence of tampering. If Hollister and Henderson were working together, there might be a paper trail. Emma and Standing Bear set out at first light, hoping to reach town and return before the worst of the storm hit. The journey was slow going, with washed-out sections of road requiring careful navigation. They rode mostly in silence, each lost in thought about what they might discover. As they crested the final ridge overlooking the town of Copper Springs, Emma noticed Standing Bear tense beside her. "Smoke," he said, pointing to a thin dark plume rising from the center of town. They urged their horses to a faster pace, approaching the main street cautiously. A crowd had gathered outside the bank, where several men were boarding up broken windows. The smoke came from a small fire that had been extinguished in a trash barrel. Sheriff Davis spotted them and walked over, his expression grim. "Miss Caldwell, Standing Bear, you picked a hell of a day to come to town." "What happened?" Emma asked, dismounting. "Henderson's dead. Found him this morning in the bank vault. Shot in the chest." The sheriff's eyes narrowed. "Robbery, most likely. The safe was open, papers scattered everywhere." Emma exchanged a quick glance with Standing Bear. "We needed to check some land records with Mr. Henderson about Hollister's claims." "Hollister found the body," Davis said. "He was meeting Henderson early to discuss some business deal." The sheriff scratched his stubbled chin. "Strange timing, you two showing up right after." Before Emma could respond, Hollister emerged from the bank, his previously immaculate appearance now disheveled. His eyes widened when he saw them. "You?" he exclaimed, pointing at Standing Bear. "Sheriff, this is the man. I saw an Indian leaving through the back window just before I discovered Henderson's body." A murmur ran through the gathered crowd. Several men moved closer, their expressions hostile. "That's a lie," Emma said firmly. "Standing Bear has been with my family since the flood began. He wasn't anywhere near town." Hollister's face flushed with apparent anger. "Are you calling me a liar, Miss Caldwell? I know what I saw. A tall Indian, slipping out the back of the bank at dawn." Standing Bear remained calm, though Emma could sense his tension. "I have not been in this town for many months." Sheriff Davis looked uncomfortable. "I'm going to need statements from everyone. And Standing Bear, I'm afraid I'll have to ask you to come to the jail while we sort this out." "This is ridiculous," Emma protested. "You have no evidence." "I have an eyewitness," Davis interrupted. "And Henderson was killed with this." He held up an evidence bag containing an arrow with distinctive markings. "Found it next to the body." Emma stared at the arrow, then at Standing Bear, whose face had gone very still. "That's Apache," Standing Bear finished quietly. "But not mine." The crowd had grown larger and more agitated. "Lock him up, Sheriff," someone called. "String him up," shouted another. Davis placed a hand on his holstered pistol. "Standing Bear, I need you to come peacefully, for your own safety as much as anything." Standing Bear's eyes met Emma's. A silent message passed between them. This was a setup, carefully orchestrated by Hollister. The developer had somehow obtained an Apache arrow, killed Henderson, and was now framing Standing Bear to eliminate opposition to his land grab. "I will come," Standing Bear told the sheriff with dignity. "But first, may I speak privately with Miss Caldwell? It concerns her father's medication." Davis hesitated, then nodded. "Make it quick." As they stepped aside, Standing Bear spoke in a low, urgent voice. "The flood documents. In your father's study, there is an old treaty signed by your grandfather and my grandfather. It establishes our shared rights to the water. Find it, it may be our only hope against Hollister's claims." "I'm not leaving you here," Emma whispered fiercely. "They're talking about lynching. If we both stay, we both die, and Hollister wins everything." Standing Bear's dark eyes held hers intensely. "Find the treaty, then get word to Swift Arrow. He knows what to do." Before Emma could protest further, a crack of thunder split the air, and rain began to fall in heavy sheets. The sudden downpour scattered the crowd, creating momentary confusion. "Go now," Standing Bear urged. "While everyone is distracted." Emma made a split-second decision. Using the chaos of the sudden storm, she mounted her horse and galloped toward the edge of town. Behind her, she heard shouts and commotion, but no one pursued her through the intensifying rain. As she rode, tears mixed with raindrops on her face. She was leaving Standing Bear to face a murder charge alone, but she was also their only hope of proving his innocence and stopping Hollister. The old treaty document might save their lands, but would it come too late to save Standing Bear from a lynch mob? The road back to the ranch was already flooding in places. Emma pushed her horse harder, knowing that both time and the elements were working against her. The steady rhythm of hoofbeats matched the pounding of her heart and the desperate mantra in her mind. Find the treaty. Save Standing Bear. Stop Hollister. Only then did she admit to herself what she had been denying for days, that her feelings for the Apache warrior had grown far beyond respect or gratitude. The thought of losing him was unbearable. "I'll never marry a giant," she had declared so confidently. Now she prayed she would have the chance to take those words back. Emma reached the ranch as the storm intensified, thunder cracking overhead and lightning illuminating the turbulent sky. The creek had already risen dangerously, threatening to cut off access to the house within hours. She stabled her exhausted horse and raced inside, heading straight for her father's study. The room still showed signs of the previous flood, water stains marking the walls up to knee-height, books and papers that had been carefully dried and replaced on shelves. Where would he keep it? Emma muttered, searching through drawers and cabinets. The treaty Standing Bear mentioned would be old, signed by her grandfather and his, something considered valuable and worth protecting. Emma moved methodically through the room, checking every potential hiding place. Nothing. The safe yielded only their dwindling cash reserves and her mother's jewelry. No treaty. Frustrated, she sank into her father's chair, trying to think like Thomas would. He was cautious, traditional, but not obvious. Where would he hide a document too important to lose but too sensitive to display? Her eyes fell on the mantelpiece where her father's silver pocket watch rested in its stand. The watch had been passed down through generations of Caldwell men, a family heirloom that Thomas cherished. Emma had never paid it much attention. It was simply part of her father, like his weathered hands or his auburn hair now streaked with silver. She picked up the watch, turning it over in her palm. Felt heavier than she expected. On impulse, she pressed the tiny latch that opened the case. The watch face looked normal, but something about the back cover seemed odd. Emma's fingers found a nearly invisible seam around the edge. Using her thumbnail, she carefully pried at the edge until the false back popped open, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside, folded into a tight square, was a yellow document. Emma's hands trembled as she unfolded it, careful not to tear the fragile paper. The heading read Treaty of Peaceful Coexistence and Shared Water Rights, dated 1855 and signed by Alexander Caldwell and Chief Running Thunder, Standing Bear's grandfather. The document clearly established shared rights to the water sources that ran through both properties and specifically prohibited any damming or diversion of the natural waterways. Most importantly, it included a detailed map of the boundaries, officially registered with the territorial government and bearing the territorial seal, the same seal that appeared on Hollister's supposedly legitimate documents. "This is it," Emma whispered. The treaty directly contradicted Hollister's claims and established that both the Caldwell family and the Apache had legal rights to the land and water. If Hollister had known about this document, it would explain why he needed Henderson dead and Standing Bear discredited. Emma carefully refolded the treaty and tucked it securely inside her shirt. She needed to get this to town, but first she had to warn Swift Arrow and the others at the cave. As she headed for the door, Thomas's pocket watch still in her hand, the sound of hoofbeats made her freeze. Through the window, she saw 3 riders approaching, Hollister and 2 rough-looking men she didn't recognize. Emma ducked away from the window, her mind racing. How had Hollister gotten here so quickly after she'd left town? He must have followed at a distance, waiting for her to lead him to whatever evidence she might find. The front door crashed open downstairs. Emma looked around desperately for a weapon, grabbing her father's shotgun from its rack. She checked the chambers, loaded. Thank goodness. "Miss Caldwell," Hollister's voice echoed from below. "I know you're here. We just want to talk about our mutual interests." Emma remained silent, positioning herself behind the study door. "Your Apache friend is in serious trouble," Hollister continued. his footsteps on the stairs now. "But I'm a reasonable man. If you cooperate, I might be able to help him." The study door pushed open slowly. Emma held her breath, the shotgun ready. Hollister stepped into the room, glancing around. "There you are," he said, spotting her in the corner. "Now let's discuss." Emma raised the shotgun. "Stay right there, Mr. Hollister." He smiled, seemingly unconcerned by the weapon. "Be sensible, Miss Caldwell. Your father is ill, your ranch is underwater, and your Indian friend is probably going to hang. I'm offering you a way out. By stealing our land? By murdering Henderson and framing Standing Bear." Emma's voice shook with anger. "I found the treaty. I know what you're trying to do." A flash of surprise crossed Hollister's face, quickly replaced by calculation. "Treaty? I don't know what you're talking about. I'm simply enforcing legal ownership rights. The treaty establishes shared water rights between our families. It specifically prohibits damming the creek, which is exactly what you're planning." Hollister's expression hardened. "An old piece of paper won't stop progress, Miss Caldwell. The territorial governor is invested in our development company. Who do you think will win that legal battle?" "The law is the law," Emma insisted, though doubt crept into her mind. Corrupt officials could certainly choose to ignore the treaty. "Be reasonable," Hollister said, taking a step forward. "The Apache will be relocated eventually anyway, and your ranch is barely surviving. I'm offering you a comfortable way out, a fair price for your cooperation." Emma's finger tightened on the trigger. "Don't come any closer." Hollister sighed. "I tried to be civilized." He nodded toward the doorway behind her. "Jackson, disarm Miss Caldwell." Emma spun to find one of Hollister's men had entered through the connecting door to the bedroom. Before she could react, he grabbed the shotgun barrel, pushing it upward as it discharged into the ceiling. In the struggle, Thomas's pocket watch fell from her hand, clattering to the floor. Hollister's boot came down on it, the silver case crumpling beneath his weight. "No!" Emma cried, as much for the destruction of her father's treasured possession as for her own predicament. Disarmed and restrained by Hollister's thug, Emma watched helplessly as Hollister approached her. "Now, about that treaty," he said, his voice dangerously soft. "Where is it?" A tremendous crack of thunder shook the house, and the lights flickered out, plunging the room into darkness broken only by flashes of lightning through the windows. In that moment, Emma made her decision. Standing Bear had risked everything to help her family. Now she would risk everything to save him. In the darkness, Emma acted instinctively. She stomped hard on her captor's foot, then drove her elbow into his midsection. The man's grip loosened just enough for her to wrench free. Another flash of lightning illuminated the room for a split second, showing Hollister lunging toward her. Emma ducked under his grasp and bolted for the door. Behind her, Hollister shouted to his men as she raced down the stairs, taking them two at a time. "She has the treaty. Don't let her escape." The main floor of the house was already taking on water, several inches deep and rising. Emma splashed through it toward the kitchen and its rear exit. Outside, the storm raged with renewed fury, rain coming down in blinding sheets. Emma ran for the stable, hoping to reach her horse, but Hollister's third man was already there, blocking the entrance. She changed direction, heading instead for the equipment shed. Inside, she found what she needed, her father's old canoe, used for fishing in calmer days. With strength born of desperation, Emma dragged the light craft to the water's edge. The creek had already breached its banks, turning the lower ranch lands into a shallow lake. If she couldn't ride to town, perhaps she could float there. Hollister and his men were searching the outbuildings, their shouts barely audible over the storm. Emma pushed the canoe into the rushing water and climbed in, using a shovel as a makeshift paddle. The current immediately seized the small craft, carrying it away from the ranch with alarming speed. Emma struggled to steer, fighting to keep the canoe from capsizing in the turbulent waters. She heard Hollister's enraged shout as he spotted her, but it was too late. She was beyond his reach, at the mercy of the flood. For nearly an hour, Emma battled the current, using all her strength and skill to navigate around debris and submerged obstacles. The rain continued unabated, soaking her to the skin. The treaty remained safe, sealed in an oilskin pouch she'd grabbed from the shed and tucked inside her shirt. The raging waters carried her past familiar landmarks now transformed by the flood. Fences reduced to protruding posts, treetops emerging from the brown expanse, occasionally the peak of a submerged structure. With horror, Emma realized she was being swept not toward town but away from it, toward the narrow canyon that lay between the ranch and the Apache settlement. The roar of water grew louder as the current accelerated. Ahead, the canyon created a natural funnel, concentrating the floodwaters into a churning rapid. Emma dug her makeshift paddle deep, trying to steer toward the bank, but the current was too strong. The canoe shot into the canyon like a bullet, spinning wildly. Emma clung to the sides, praying the fragile craft would survive the passage. Around a bend, disaster struck. A partially submerged tree loomed directly in her path. She tried to avoid it, but the current slammed the canoe broadside into the obstacle. The impact threw Emma into the raging water. She surfaced, gasping, as the shattered canoe disappeared downstream. The treaty pouch remained secure against her chest, but now she faced the flood's full fury without protection. Emma fought to keep her head above water, swimming desperately toward what looked like a lower bank. Her sodden clothes dragged at her limbs, and exhaustion threatened to overwhelm her. Just as her strength began to fail, her feet touched something solid, a submerged sandbar. She staggered forward until she reached a small rise of land just high enough to escape the flood. Collapsing on the muddy ground, Emma struggled to catch her breath. She had no idea where she was. Somewhere between the ranch and the Apache settlement, but how far from either? The storm showed no sign of abating, and night would fall within hours. Miss Caldwell. The voice seemed impossible, a hallucination born of desperation. But when Emma looked up, she saw Swift Arrow on horseback at the edge of the flooded area, waving frantically. "Here!" she shouted, waving back weakly. Swift Arrow guided his horse carefully through the shallower water until he reached her. "Standing Bear sent me to find you," he said, helping her mount behind him. "He said you would need help." "But Standing Bear is in jail," Emma said, confused. "How could he send you?" "He escaped during the confusion when the jail started flooding," Swift Arrow explained as they rode toward higher ground. "The sheriff was moving prisoners to the courthouse. Standing Bear knew Hollister would come after you." Emma's heart leaped. "He's free? Is he safe?" "For now. He is gathering our warriors." Swift Arrow's expression was grim. "Hollister's men are watching the roads to town, and there is talk of a hunting party looking for my brother." They reached the ridge trail that led to the Apache settlement. From this vantage point, Emma could see the extent of the flooding. The entire valley floor was now underwater, with only the highest points remaining dry. "Your father and the others have been moved to our settlement," Swift Arrow told her. "It sits higher than the cave and is better protected." Relief flooded through Emma at this news. "Thank you. I found the treaty Standing Bear mentioned. It proves our rights to the land and water." Swift Arrow nodded. "Good. But we must hurry. Standing Bear plans to return to town tonight to clear his name." "That's madness. They'll kill him. My brother believes it is the only way to save both our peoples." Swift Arrow urged his horse forward. "He said to tell you that some things are worth dying for." As they rode toward the settlement, Emma clutched the treaty pouch, her mind racing. Standing Bear was willing to sacrifice himself to protect his people and hers. The thought of losing him, this man she had once dismissed so easily, was now unbearable. At the Apache settlement, they found organized activity despite the storm. Women were securing dwellings while men prepared weapons and horses. Chief Running Cloud sat with the tribal elders under a protected shelter, deep in discussion. Standing Bear emerged from a dwelling, his tall figure unmistakable even in the gathering dusk. When he saw Emma, relief transformed his stoic features. In 3 long strides, he reached her as Swift Arrow helped her dismount. Without a word, Standing Bear placed something around her neck, a small leather pouch decorated with intricate beadwork, hanging from a braided cord. "A protection amulet," he explained, his deep voice barely audible above the storm. "To keep you safe when I cannot." The simple gesture, so full of meaning and care, broke through Emma's last defenses. She reached up to touch the amulet, then Standing Bear's face, her fingers tracing the strong line of his jaw. "I found the treaty," she said, "but Hollister knows about it now. He's coming for all of us." Standing Bear covered her hand with his much larger one. "Then we will face him together." By dawn, the storm had diminished to a steady drizzle, but the flood waters continued to rise as runoff from the mountains poured into the already swollen creek. Standing Bear, Emma, and a small group of Apache warriors prepared to leave for the Caldwell ranch, believing Thomas might still be in danger from Hollister and his men. "I should come with you," Swift Arrow insisted, but Standing Bear shook his head. "You must stay and protect our people. If we fail, you will need to lead them to the high country." Before departing, Emma and Standing Bear examined the treaty together. The yellow document clearly established the shared water rights and explicitly prohibited any damming of the natural waterways. Most importantly, it bore the territorial seal and the signature of the governor from 30 years prior. "This should be enough to stop Hollister legally," Emma said, "but I doubt he plans to let legal matters stand in his way now." Standing Bear agreed. "Men like Hollister believe power creates its own justice. He has already killed for this land. He will not hesitate to kill again." They set out on horseback, taking a circuitous route to approach the ranch from the eastern ridge. The valley below resembled a vast, muddy lake, with only the highest points still visible above the flood waters. The main house of the Caldwell ranch stood like an island, its lower floor submerged but the upper story still dry. Through a spyglass, Standing Bear surveyed the property. "Hollister's men are there, 2 by the barn, 1 on the porch, and smoke from the chimney. Someone is inside." Emma's heart clenched with fear for her father. "Papa must have returned to the house, looking for me. Hollister will use him as leverage." They watched as a figure emerged onto the porch, Hollister himself, easily identifiable by his distinctive coat. He scanned the surroundings, then went back inside. "We need a diversion," Standing Bear decided. 2 warriors will draw away the men outside. Then we approach from the rear." The plan worked perfectly. The Apache warriors created a disturbance near the remnants of the corral, drawing Hollister's guards away from the house. Standing Bear and Emma slipped through the floodwaters, wading waist-deep until they reached the back of the house. They entered through a second-floor window that Emma knew was always left unlocked. Inside, they moved silently down the hallway toward the sound of voices coming from the study. Through the partially open door, Emma could see her father seated in his chair, pale but alert. Hollister stood before him, holding a map that Emma recognized as part of the documents he had shown them earlier. "I've explained the situation quite clearly, Mr. Caldwell," Hollister was saying. "Your daughter has stolen something that belongs to me. When she returns, and she will return for you, I want that treaty." "The treaty doesn't belong to you," Thomas replied, his voice weak but steady. "It belongs to both our families and the Apache." Hollister laughed coldly. "A piece of paper signed by savages has no legal standing. My development company has the governor's support and enough capital to make this valley profitable for the first time in its history." Thomas shook his head. "This valley has supported both our families for generations. Your dam will destroy a way of life." Progress always destroys the old ways, Hollister said dismissively. The Apache will be relocated to a reservation where they belong, and this valley will finally contribute to civilization. Timber, minerals, water controlled and harnessed for productive use. As he spoke, Hollister unfolded another map, one Emma hadn't seen before. Standing Bear tensed beside her as they both recognized what it showed. A comprehensive development plan for the entire valley, including a massive dam, mining operations, timber harvesting, and a railroad spur. "You're not just after our land," Thomas said, realization dawning in his voice. "You want everything, the whole valley. Finally catching up, are you?" Hollister smirked. "The Apache lands contain copper deposits worth a fortune. Your ranch controls key water rights. Together, they're the key to developing this entire region." "And Henderson? Did he catch up too late as well?" Hollister's expression hardened. "Henderson got greedy. He wanted a larger share than our agreement specified. When he threatened to expose our plans to you, he became a liability. So you killed him and framed Standing Bear. The Apache was a convenient scapegoat. 2 birds, 1 stone. Discredit the tribe's most educated leader and eliminate opposition to my land claim." Hollister pulled out a pistol. "Now, let's discuss your daughter's whereabouts. I'm running out of patience." Emma had heard enough. She pushed the door open and stepped into the room, Standing Bear a silent shadow behind her. "I'm right here, Mr. Hollister," she said clearly. Hollister spun around, his pistol instinctively tracking toward her. When he saw Standing Bear, his eyes widened in momentary surprise before his composure returned. "Miss Caldwell, and the escaped murderer himself. How convenient." "The only murderer in this room is you," Emma said, stepping closer to her father's chair. "We heard your confession." Hollister smiled thinly. 3 witnesses against 1 respected businessman with the governor's ear. "Who do you think people will believe?" "The treaty is enough to stop your plans legally," Emma said. "The territorial court will recognize its validity. If it ever reaches the court." Hollister's pistol remained steady. "Now, hand over the treaty, and I might let you all live long enough to be relocated with the rest of the Apache." Emma felt Standing Bear move slightly behind her, positioning himself. She needed to keep Hollister talking, keep his attention focused on her. "Why this valley?" she asked. "There are other places with copper, other watersheds you could dam." "Location, Miss Caldwell. This valley sits at the perfect junction for the new railroad expansion. Whoever controls the water and minerals here controls the future of territorial development." Pride crept into Hollister's voice as he warmed to his subject. "This backwater will become a hub of industry and commerce. Your grandchildren would thank me, if you were going to have any." As he spoke, Emma caught a glimpse of movement outside the window behind Hollister. Swift Arrow and several Apache warriors had positioned themselves on the roof of the porch, ready to enter through the windows at Standing Bear's signal. Emma locked eyes with her father, seeing understanding dawn in his face. Thomas nodded almost imperceptibly. "The treaty," Hollister demanded again, gesturing with his pistol. Emma's hand moved to the pouch containing the document. "You want it? Here it is." Emma slowly withdrew the oilskin pouch containing the treaty. As Hollister's attention fixed on it, Standing Bear gave a sharp whistle, the signal. Simultaneously, the windows crashed inward as Swift Arrow and the Apache warriors burst into the room. Hollister reacted instantly, grabbing Thomas and pressing the pistol to his head. "Stay back," he shouted, "or the old man dies first." Everyone froze. Emma's heart hammered in her chest as she watched her father's face, pale but determined, in Hollister's grasp. "The treaty," Hollister demanded again. "On the desk. Now." Emma hesitated, her gaze meeting Standing Bear's. His slight nod conveyed a message. Comply for now. She placed the oilskin pouch on the desk. "Now all of you, outside," Hollister ordered. backing toward the door, still using Thomas as a shield. My men are still out there, and they'll happily shoot any Apache they see. They followed Hollister's instructions, moving out onto the landing at the top of the stairs. The lower floor remained flooded, water lapping at the bottom steps. Outside, they could hear shouts, Hollister's remaining men engaging with the Apache warriors. Suddenly, a tremendous crack echoed through the house. The floor beneath them shuddered. The foundation, Emma gasped. The flood has undermined it. Another crack, louder this time. The entire structure groaned like a living thing in pain. Part of the landing gave way, creating a gap between them and Hollister, who still held Thomas at the study doorway. The house is collapsing, Standing Bear said urgently. We must leave now. Hollister's face contorted with rage and fear. The treaty, he insisted, reaching back to grab the pouch from the desk while maintaining his grip on Thomas. Let my father go, Emma pleaded. Take the treaty and go. And have you all testify against me? I don't think so. Hollister's eyes darted around, calculating his escape. I'm taking both the old man and the treaty. Anyone follows me, he dies. As he spoke, another section of flooring gave way. Thomas, seizing the moment of distraction, drove his elbow back hard into Hollister's ribs. The developer staggered, his grip loosening enough for Thomas to wrench free. Papa! Emma cried as her father stumbled toward them. The floor between them continued to splinter. Thomas looked down at the widening gap, then back at Emma, making a split-second decision. He tossed the oilskin pouch across the gap to her. Run, Emma! He shouted as more of the landing collapsed behind him, trapping him with Hollister. Standing Bear reacted without hesitation. From his belt, he pulled a coiled rope, a specially braided Apache lariat made from buffalo hide, stronger than any conventional rope. Swift Arrow grabbed one end, anchoring himself against the still solid banister. Hold this, Standing Bear instructed Emma, handing her the middle section of the rope. Then, with the agility of a mountain lion, he leaped across the gap, landing beside Thomas just as another section of floor gave way. Hollister scrambled backward, his face contorted with fury. You're all going to die here, he shouted, firing his pistol wildly. The bullet splintered the wood near Standing Bear's head. The house shuddered again. The study floor began to tilt as the supporting beams below surrendered to the floodwaters. Thomas stumbled, too weak to maintain his balance on the shifting surface. Standing Bear swept the older man up in his powerful arms. Securing the rope around them both, he shouted to Swift Arrow and Emma, "Pull now!" They hauled on the rope as Standing Bear leaped back across the widening chasm. Thomas clutched safely against his chest. They landed hard on the more stable section of landing, Swift Arrow helping to steady them. "My deepest thanks," Thomas said breathlessly to Standing Bear. Hollister, now alone on the failing section of floor, fired again at them. The bullet went wide as the floor beneath him dropped another foot, throwing off his aim. "We need to get out," Swift Arrow urged. The whole house could go any minute. They made their way carefully down the partial staircase to where the water filled the lower floor. Wading through chest-deep water, they finally emerged outside to find the battle between Hollister's men and the Apache warriors had ended. Hollister's thugs lay bound near what remained of the garden. A tremendous crash behind them announced the collapse of the entire eastern section of the house, including the study where they had left Hollister. The structure folded in on itself, disappearing beneath the flood waters. "Is he?" Emma began. "We cannot know for certain," Standing Bear said. "But no man could survive that collapse." They made their way to higher ground where horses waited. As Thomas was helped onto a mount, Emma turned to Standing Bear, suddenly realizing he was bleeding from his side. "You're hurt!" she exclaimed, reaching toward the dark stains spreading across his buckskin shirt. "It is nothing, a graze only," he insisted, though his face was drawn with pain. Hollister's bullet must have hit you during the rescue, Swift Arrow said, examining the wound. It needs tending, brother. Standing Bear nodded, but his focus remained on the valley around them. The flood has reached its peak, he observed. The waters will begin to recede soon. Emma followed his gaze across the transformed landscape. The confrontation with Hollister might be over, but the future remained uncertain. The treaty was safe, but how much weight would it carry with territorial officials who had supported Hollister's plans? As if reading her thoughts, Thomas spoke up. That treaty bears the signature and seal of a territorial governor. It will stand in any court. Hollister may have had the current governor in his pocket, but he cannot erase the legal rights established by his predecessor. And Hollister's confession to Henderson's murder? Emma asked. Without him to testify against. We all heard it, Thomas said firmly. Our combined testimony will be enough to clear Standing Bear's name, especially with Sheriff Davis already suspicious of Hollister's convenient discovery of the body. Standing Bear swayed slightly in his saddle, the blood loss taking its toll despite his stoic expression. Emma moved her horse alongside his, supporting him with a hand on his arm. First we tend to your wound, she said in a tone that brooked no argument. Then we deal with territorial officials. Standing Bear looked down at her, a rare smile softening his features. You would make a formidable Apache wife, he said softly, always putting healing before vengeance. Emma felt her cheeks warm at his words, but she didn't pull away. Instead, she tightened her grip on his arm. Let's get you both to safety, she said, including her father in her concerned gaze. The rest can wait. As they rode away from the remains of the Caldwell ranch, Emma realized that home was no longer defined by the walls of a house, but by the people with whom she had weathered the storm. 2 weeks after the flood waters began to recede, the valley slowly emerged from beneath its muddy blanket. Fields once lush with grass now lay under a layer of silt. Fences had vanished, buildings stood damaged or destroyed, and the creek had carved new channels across the landscape. Yet amid the destruction, hope sprouted like the green shoots already pushing through the mud. The Apache settlement, situated on higher ground, had survived largely intact and became a center for recovery efforts. The Caldwell ranch house, though severely damaged, remained partially standing. Its upper floor served as temporary quarters while Thomas supervised the rebuilding of the barn and outbuildings. Standing Bear's wound had healed quickly under the care of Gray Dove, the tribe's most skilled healer. Emma had remained by his side throughout his recovery, learning Apache healing methods while sharing her own knowledge of Western medicine. In town, the aftermath of Hollister's schemes continued to unfold. Sheriff Davis had found documentation in Henderson's office confirming the banker's complicity in the land fraud. The territorial governor, facing questions about his own involvement with Western Territories Development Company, had quickly recognized the validity of the original treaty when presented with it by Thomas and Chief Running Cloud. Hollister's body had washed up 10 miles downstream, removing any doubt about his fate. His men, faced with charges of conspiracy and attempted murder, had quickly turned on each other, providing authorities with detailed accounts of Hollister's plans and Henderson's murder. Most surprising to Emma was the change in the townspeople's attitudes. The story of Standing Bear's escape from jail not to flee justice but to save the valley had spread quickly. His rescue of Thomas Caldwell, at risk to his own life, had transformed him in local eyes from that Apache giant to a man worthy of respect. On a clear spring morning, Emma stood on the porch of the partially rebuilt ranch house, watching riders approach from town. Thomas joined her, moving more slowly these days but steadily regaining his strength. Sheriff Davis, Thomas identified the lead rider, and Judge Wilson with him. Must be news about the territorial hearing. Emma nodded, smoothing the front of her dress. Not her usual practical riding skirt, but a simple white dress Rosalinda had helped her make from fabric saved from the flood. She'd found herself caring more about her appearance lately, especially when Standing Bear was expected, as he was today for the meeting with the officials. The riders arrived just as Standing Bear and Chief Running Cloud appeared from the eastern trail. Emma felt her heart quicken at the sight of Standing Bear astride his paint horse. He wore a combination of traditional Apache clothing and Western attire, buckskin leggings and a white cotton shirt. His long hair tied back with a beaded leather band. The outfit symbolized the bridging of their two worlds in a way that struck Emma as both appropriate and deeply attractive. Greetings were exchanged on the porch with Judge Wilson, a gray-haired man with kind eyes and a reputation for fairness, taking the lead. "I've come directly from the territorial capital," he announced. "The governor has formally recognized the Treaty of 1855 between the Caldwell family and the Apache people. Furthermore, in light of recent events, he has approved a special joint stewardship arrangement for the watershed." The judge handed Thomas and Chief Running Cloud identical documents bearing the territorial seal. "These establish legal protection for both your claims and create a cooperative management structure for the shared water resources." Sheriff Davis spoke up next. "Hollister's remaining associates have been indicted for fraud and conspiracy. The Western Territories Development Company has been dissolved, and all their claims in the valley have been nullified." "And Standing Bear's name?" Emma asked, unable to keep silent any longer. The sheriff nodded. "Completely cleared. The territorial record will show he was falsely accused and acted heroically to save the valley and its people." Relief and joy spread through Emma. The nightmare was truly over. Their lands were secure, Standing Bear's reputation restored, and a new cooperation between their peoples officially recognized. As the officials moved inside to discuss details, Emma found herself alone on the porch with Standing Bear. His dark eyes studied her white dress with appreciation. "You look like a cloud on a summer day," he said softly. Emma smiled, no longer fighting the warmth that spread through her at his words. "I wanted to mark the occasion properly." Standing Bear stepped closer. "And what occasion would that be?" "The beginning of something new." Emma gathered her courage. "Standing Bear, these past weeks have changed everything I thought I knew. About your people, about myself, about what matters in life." He remained silent, waiting for her to continue, his steady gaze giving her strength. "When I said I'd never marry a giant, I was afraid, not of your size, but of the size of the change you represented." Emma took his hand, marveling at how right it felt despite the difference in scale. "Now I understand that some changes, no matter how large, are worth embracing." Standing Bear's fingers gently closed around hers. "Among my people, a woman speaks her heart plainly when she has made a choice." Emma's smile deepened. "Then let me be plain. I choose you, your strength, your wisdom, your kindness. If you still wish for a union between our families, I would be honored to stand beside you." The rare, full smile that transformed Standing Bear's face was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. He didn't answer with words. Instead, he reached into his pocket and withdrew a small object, a band of silver set with turquoise stones. "I had this made in town," he said, his deep voice soft with emotion. "The silver from a coin your father gave me when we first discussed alliance. The stones from my mother's necklace." Emma caught her breath as he held it out to her, a perfect circle joining their separate worlds. The ceremony took place on the gentle rise between the Caldwell Ranch and the Apache settlement, a physical and symbolic middle ground between the two worlds. A large circle had been formed with stones gathered from the creek bed, the same creek that had nearly destroyed them now contributing to their union. Emma stood beside her father, wearing her white dress adorned with a belt of Apache beadwork that Gray Dove had gifted her. Her auburn hair was loosely braided with small white flowers tucked throughout. In her hands, she held a bouquet of desert blooms gathered by Swift Arrow, who had appointed himself her unofficial brother and cultural guide. Standing Bear waited at the center of the stone circle, tall and proud in traditional Apache ceremonial attire, though he had conceded to Thomas's request for a formal Western-style coat over his buckskin shirt. The contrast suited him, Emma thought, much as his dual nature as both educated leader and traditional warrior had come to fascinate her. The valley's residents had gathered for the occasion. The remaining ranch hands and their families, townspeople whose attitudes had shifted after witnessing Standing Bear's heroism, and the entire Apache community. Even Sheriff Davis and Judge Wilson had ridden out to attend, bringing news that the territorial governor would be sending an official representative the following week to formally recognize their unique arrangement. The ceremony itself blended traditions. Reverend Collins from the town church spoke first, offering Christian blessings and abbreviated vows that acknowledged both Emma's faith and the unprecedented nature of the union. Then Chief Running Cloud led an Apache blessing, speaking in his native tongue while Standing Bear translated for the non-Apache guests. When Emma joined Standing Bear in the center of the circle, the height difference between them drew a few smiles from the crowd. She barely reached his shoulder. Yet, as she placed her hand in his, the physical disparity seemed to emphasize rather than diminish the rightness of their match. His immense strength had saved her father. Her unwavering determination had saved his people's land. Together, they formed a whole greater than its parts. "I once feared the size of the changes you would bring to my life," Emma said, speaking her personally written vows clearly enough for all to hear. "Now I understand that your greatness of spirit matches your physical presence, and both have made room for me exactly as I am." Standing Bear's response came in both Apache and English, his deep voice carrying across the gathering. "You saw me first as different, as other. I saw you as the same, a protector of your people, a guardian of your land. Now we see each other truly, and in that seeing, we find peace." Swift Arrow stepped forward, carrying a deerskin document adorned with both Apache symbols and English text. Judge Wilson joined him, and together they presented what had come to be called the Dual Land Agreement, a legal document that formalized the cooperative management of the combined Caldwell and Apache lands. Thomas and Chief Running Cloud were the first to sign, their pens making parallel marks on the parchment. Then Emma and Standing Bear added their signatures, binding not just their lives but their legacies together. As the document was completed, a cheer rose from the gathered community. The celebration that followed brought further blending of cultures. Apache drums accompanying fiddle music from town, traditional foods from both communities shared freely, and children from both worlds playing games together without concern for differences. Thomas found Emma sitting with Standing Bear beneath a cottonwood tree as the celebration continued into the evening. He lowered himself carefully beside them, still moving gingerly from his injuries. "Your mother would have loved this," he told Emma, his eyes glistening. "She always said the valley had room for all who respected it." Emma leaned against her husband's solid warmth. "I wish she could have seen it." "She sees," Standing Bear said with quiet certainty. "My people believe those who have walked on remain close when great joy visits their loved ones." Thomas nodded, then reached into his pocket. "I've been saving this for the right moment." He withdrew his silver pocket watch, not the original that had been destroyed during the confrontation with Hollister, but a new one crafted by the town's silversmith. "My father gave me his watch when I took a wife. Now I pass this tradition to you, Standing Bear, as you join our family." Standing Bear accepted the gift with evident emotion, his large hands cradling the silver timepiece with characteristic gentleness. "I am honored. In return, I have something for you." He gestured to Swift Arrow, who brought forward a beautifully tanned deerskin map. "This shows all the hidden springs and water sources across our combined lands. Knowledge my family has kept for generations, now shared with yours." As Thomas examined the map with wonder, Emma felt a profound sense of rightness wash over her. This was what healing looked like, the sharing of gifts, the honoring of traditions while creating new ones, the slow building of trust. Later, as twilight deepened into night, Emma and Standing Bear slipped away from the celebration. He led her to a ridge overlooking the valley, where a small cabin had been constructed, not quite Apache, not quite Western, but something new that incorporated elements of both. Our first home, Standing Bear said, watching her reaction carefully. Until we decide where to build permanently. Emma explored the simple structure with growing delight. Inside, she found furniture carved by Standing Bear himself, Apache textiles alongside her salvaged family quilts, and windows positioned to catch both sunrise and sunset. It's perfect, she said, turning to embrace him. A true beginning. Standing Bear's arms encircled her, strong yet gentle. The first of many perfect things we will build together. 1 year later, spring bloomed across the valley with unprecedented vigor. The flood's devastation had given way to renewal, with wildflowers carpeting the landscape in brilliant purple, yellows, and reds. The creek, now flowing peacefully along its altered course, nourished both Caldwell and Apache lands through an irrigation system that combined traditional Apache techniques with modern engineering. Emma sat on the wide porch of the rebuilt ranch house, a small bundle cradled in her arms. The infant, just 2 weeks old, slept peacefully, his copper skin a shade lighter than his father's, his wispy dark hair showing hints of Emma's auburn tint in the sunlight. Standing Bear emerged from the house, moving with his characteristic quiet grace despite his size. He settled beside his wife and son on the porch swing he had crafted during Emma's pregnancy. A perfect joining of Apache design and Western comfort, like so much of their shared life. He still sleeps? Standing Bear asked, his deep voice softened to avoid disturbing the baby. Emma nodded. Like his father, nothing seems to trouble his dreams. Standing Bear smiled, the expression coming more easily to him now than it had a year ago. Gently, he traced the curve of his son's cheek with one large finger. He has your determination. Grey Dove says she has never seen a newborn grip so strongly. Thomas Rain, Emma said, speaking their son's name with reverence. They had chosen to honor both grandfathers, Thomas Caldwell and Standing Bear's father, whose Apache name translated to Rainbringer. The dual naming reflected the child's heritage and their hopes for his future. From the direction of the settlement, they heard the sound of approaching horses. Thomas Caldwell appeared first, sitting straighter in his saddle these days, his health fully restored. Behind him rode Swift Arrow, now the official liaison between the Apache settlement and the growing town of Copper Springs. "There's my grandson," Thomas called out as he dismounted, his face breaking into the wide smile reserved exclusively for the newest Caldwell. "Is he awake for his grandfather's visit?" "Just stirring," Emma replied, shifting the baby as he began to wake. Thomas climbed the porch steps, moving with surprising agility for a man who had nearly died twice in the past year. The flood had changed him too, softening his edges while strengthening his core. He had gradually stepped back from daily ranch operations, entrusting more responsibility to Emma and Standing Bear while focusing his energy on the cooperative council that governed their shared lands. Swift Arrow bounded up after Thomas, carrying a small wooden object wrapped in soft deerskin. "A gift for my nephew," he announced proudly. "His first cradle board, for when he is ready to be carried on journeys." Standing Bear accepted the gift, examining his brother's craftsmanship with approval. The traditional Apache cradle board had been modified with elements of Western design, a blend that characterized so much of their lives now. "It's beautiful, Swift Arrow," Emma said sincerely. "Your skill grows with each piece." Swift Arrow beamed at the praise. "I have news from town as well. The school council has approved our proposal. Starting next month, I will teach Apache language and customs to all children, not just our own." This development represented the culmination of months of effort by Swift Arrow and several forward-thinking town residents. The idea that Apache culture contained valuable knowledge worth preserving and sharing had slowly taken root in the community. Thomas took his turn holding the baby, his weathered hands gentle with the small bundle. "The territorial representative was impressed with our harvest numbers," he reported. "Says our cooperative farming methods yield more than any other region in similar conditions." They're sending agricultural students next season to learn our techniques. Emma exchanged a proud glance with Standing Bear. Their union had sparked changes beyond their personal happiness. Changes that rippled outward through both communities, creating possibilities neither could have achieved alone. As the afternoon sun began its descent, they shared a meal on the porch, the conversation flowing easily between English and Apache phrases, with Swift Arrow teaching Thomas new words and Thomas sharing stories of Emma's childhood. Later, as twilight settled over the valley, Emma and Standing Bear walked to the rise behind their house, the baby securely wrapped against his father's broad chest. Below them stretched the patchwork of their joined lands, Caldwell cattle grazing alongside Apache horses, fields planted with both traditional crops and new varieties, the creek winding through it all like a silver thread. "Did you ever imagine this?" Emma asked, leaning into her husband's solid warmth. "When we first met, when I called you the giant and swore I'd never marry you?" Standing Bear's arm tightened around her shoulders. "I saw possibility," he admitted, "though even I could not envision all that has come to pass." Emma reached up to touch his face, still marveling at the journey that had brought them together. "I was so afraid of differences, of change. Now I can't imagine a life without both." "The measure of a heart," Standing Bear said softly, echoing words he had spoken during their courtship, "is not its size, but its capacity to grow." As if in agreement, little Thomas Rain stirred against his father's chest, his tiny hand reaching up to grasp Standing Bear's finger with surprising strength. Emma watched her husband and son, the two most important men in her life, one a giant in stature, the other tiny but already showing signs of his father's height. Between them stretched a future neither Apache nor white, but something new and stronger. She had once declared she would never marry a giant. Now, standing in the gentle evening light with her family, Emma Caldwell Standing Bear knew she had found not just a husband, but a heart as vast as the valley they called home.